welcome once again to WJ Live, powered by The Western Journal. I'm George Upper, editor-in-chief of The Western Journal. I'm joined today by Cameron Arcand, one of our contributors for The Western Journal, as well as Deputy Managing Editor Joseph Sedian. I said Deputy Managing Editor. I should add Mets fan to that as well.
It's the first time you've been able to say Mets on the podcast.
I think he actually primarily identifies that way before any other. I think he introduces himself that way before he mentions his name to other people. So important we get that on the record today. I think today we're going to talk about yet another Andrew Cuomo scandal. Honestly, I'm starting to lose count from your home state. Governor of your home state, former home state, I guess. And
the reason I don't live there anymore.
That's a good reason, but anyone will do. In the aftermath of the long-awaited first Joe Biden press conference yesterday, before we dive into that, I want to just remind you very quickly to our viewers to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're not on YouTube listening to us right now, it's easy to find. It's youtube.com/WJLive. Click that bell. So you're notified whenever a new episode comes up. And feel free, in fact, to comment. We invite you to comment on the video as well. Let us know how we're doing. We really appreciate hearing from you. So, Joe, how's Andrew Cuomo doing?
Well, he's not doing that great. All right. We know that Andrew Cuomo has had a few controversies, scandals as the governor of New York in recent years. You've had the nursing home scandal, where he basically forced nursing homes and older care centers to take in patients who had been infected with coronavirus. You had the sexual harassment scandal, where he has been accused by, I think the number's at 8 now,
Something
8 women of inappropriate conduct toward them. And now you have another scandal where, according to the Albany Times-Union, he gave priority in the early days of the pandemic, last March, to people close to him, his family, in terms of coronavirus testing. Now, according to the Times-Union, one of the people who got special treatment was his brother, Chris Cuomo. Remember how they had all those cutesy little segments on CNN where they were laughing and talking about mom's dinner and who was going to call mom and, you know, lovely things that no one really found that funny, but that we were told was very cute and
It's
adorable.
High humor for CNN. If you're a CNN viewer, this is like as good as it gets.
And amid that controversy, that sort of brought CNN into the controversy, right? Because there is some sort of journalistic questions, if you can call what CNN does journalism. Chris Cuomo is an anchor on CNN, and he reportedly was receiving special treatment thanks to his brother in terms of early coronavirus testing and priority.
Right.
And CNN put out a statement, and they said, "We generally do not get involved in the medical decisions of our employees. However, it is not surprising that in the earliest days of the pandemic, of a once-in-a-century global pandemic, when Chris was showing symptoms and was concerned about possible spread, he turned to anyone he could for advice and assistance, as any human being would." Now, here's the thing. That's a statement from CNN. I tend to agree with them that Chris Cuomo obviously wanted to get testing from, as soon as possible.
Sure.
We remember that the government at all levels really kind of bungled the whole testing thing in the early days of the pandemic.
Well, and in those days, everyone thought it was like a 90% fatality rate, and
a lot of misinformation
people
going
were turning around and dying.
Everyone
from
was
this thing.
buying toilet paper. It was flying off the walls. It was
a
whole thing.
It was a mess. Yeah,
it was a mess. But here's my issue with it. Right, Chris Cuomo had been interviewing his brother on CNN for a long time. And it sounds like he was aware of a scandal involving the governor of one of the biggest states in the union for about a year. And he was involved in that scandal because he knew about that scandal because he was a recipient, reportedly, of that scandal.
Right.
That raises some questions for me, right? We already know that CNN has, let's just say, not the highest editorial standards. But it's super disturbing that, a member of the media can be aware of a scandal because they were involved in it regarding a public figure and then just not say anything. So my question, I'll ask you first, Cameron. Why is CNN, defending Chris Cuomo?
It's ratings. That's what it comes down to. CNN, particularly a lot of their late night show hosts, the whole shtick with Chris Cuomo and Andrew Cuomo really catered to kind of that corporate left, that upper middle class watcher who maybe thought this was like George was saying, like this was high humor for the average CNN watcher. It brought in ratings, and I don't know where their ratings are. Probably not close to where they are when Trump was president, but they're still keeping him on because he's another one of the late night shouting heads that counters the people at Fox and all the other networks. And I think the reason why they are protecting him in a sense is if they weren't protecting him, it would essentially be admitting that they were wrong, admitting that they let Cuomo get away with all of this, that they weren't looking at the stories coming out of New York with the journalistic lens. They were instead looking at it with more of a political lens in the sense that, hey, we like Andrew Cuomo. We're not going to scrutinize what he has to say.
And that was a really good point you brought up about the ratings. I think we ran a story about this at the Western Journal. I believe since Biden's inauguration, CNN's primetime viewership among the key ages, 25 to 54 demographic is down about 47%.
Yeah,
almost half.
We had a situation where Fox News was sort of on top of that for a while, and then towards the end of 2020, very beginning of 2021, we saw MSNBC, CNN overtake some of that because of the election controversy and all of the stuff that was going on from November through January for about two and a half months there. That's now reversed itself, not really because Fox has come back on top and improved their ratings, but because Fox has more or less stayed where they were, and MSNBC and CNN have sunk back to their previous levels. Trump predicted months ago that if he was gone, if he was off of the out of the public eye, that news ratings would go down significantly, and he was correct. People tuned in to watch him, whether they liked him or not.
They were the resistance,
Right.
CNN, MSNBC, I would even say, the New York Times, the Washington Post represented to this kind of class of liberal people who felt like, they were very oppressed, and these poor people who couldn't, get anything done during Trump. They were like their shining beacons. Democracy dies in darkness. They were, the people pretended to care about the free press and all of this stuff during Trump, and it was all kind of a facade. And now that the hero is in, Joe Biden's in office, and you don't have to worry about anything now.
Right, everything's going to be
President
fine.
Biden
Uncle
will
Joe's
take care
gonna
of everything. Just don't worry about it. You don't have to keep track of stuff anymore. Just trust the government because they're going to look out for you.
Yeah,
And
they're here to help.
yeah. Thanks, Reagan.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think about the scandal, George? Do you think that CNN they just have no choice but to defend Chris Cuomo?
They don't. Look, if I were Chris Cuomo, if I were Andrew Cuomo, I'd probably do what Chris and Andrew Cuomo did. I mean, if I have access to, I'm not saying that's right. That's not my argument at all. But if I've got access to tests and I have family members who are concerned that they might be sick, particularly a year ago, when, as we said, when there was so much less known about the coronavirus and its symptoms and how many people were dying from it and all that kind of stuff. Remember, there was this great sense of panic that we argued against at the Western Journal. Everybody said calm down, but a lot of people didn't calm down. And so if I were in that situation and had that power and that authority and special privileged access to these things, I can very easily see myself sharing that with loved ones and family members and whatnot. That's why, as a conservative, I argue that there should be as few people with as little privilege and access as possible. That's why we argue for small government, because that's what people do. If you give them power, you give them authority, no matter what their motives are. I think I'm a pretty, kind-hearted guy, generally speaking. I'm not any more corrupt than the average person on the street. But you give me power and I will abuse it. That's what I do. I am as broken as anyone else. So that's why we give as little power. That's why conservatives want to give as little power as possible to everybody, because we expect them, at least at times, to abide by their baser instincts, to be selfish, to look out for themselves first and their family members first, et cetera. So I'm not all that surprised to hear that Cuomo's did this. But it does, to your earlier point, Joe, I think it really does call into question this sort of incestuous relationship between the political class and establishment media figures, and it doesn't get any more incestuous than two brothers joking around on late night CNN. I mean, you have at that point ceased to pretend that there's any sort of journalistic integrity or objectivity anymore. It's you just throw it out the window. Everybody's in on the joke now. You know, we've been pretending all along that the media is here to hold the government accountable. Right. Chris Cuomo's holding Andrew Cuomo accountable. Sure. Okay. Whatever. Turn the channel.
And this is as establishment as you get, right? You know,
Oh gosh,
people,
yes.
people voted Andrew Cuomo into office. No problem with that. Legitimately elected leader. But kind of the Cuomo...
I don't know. Were Dominion voting machines involved in that process?
Oh, God.
But, you know, this is about, you know, as much of a political dynasty as you can imagine.
Yeah,
You have Mario
absolutely.
Cuomo, who was the governor of New York for a long time. You have his two sons. One is a very, very, very well-known CNN host, not just, you know, run-of-the-mill CNN reporter.
Right,
This
no.
guy is
He's got his own
primetime
show, yeah.
CNN. Prime time's even in the name of his show. And then you have Andrew Cuomo, governor, just like his father. And I think Andrew Cuomo, they're divorced now, but he married into the Kennedy family.
believe
They're
that's
about as, you know, as establishment, as old
it's
political
as
dynasty
aristocracy
as you can.
get in the United
yet,
States,
you know,
pretty much.
I mean, also,
You have the Bushes, too.
You know, no,
It
yeah, no,
happens,
it's not exclusive
but,
to
you know,
one side of
liberals-
the aisle.
Liberals
no.
talk about how, aristocracy's so bad. And it is, but you take care of your own stuff first.
Right.
What were you going to say, Cameron?
also this, I would not want to be a publicist or a PR person at CNN right now. This is not good for them. It's not good for the Cuomos either.
No way
And
to
you have a
spin
point
this.
there. I think Andrew Cuomo said recently that he considers himself to be an outsider, which I think is just downright
He's
laughable.
the insider of
because-
insiders.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. And these people, they know that almost nothing bad, they think that they are untouchable. So they think they can get away with certain things, particularly when you are in such a state where, like, such a deep blue state or such a deep red
Right,
state,
right.
where you can almost get away with anything short of a serious crime, which, I mean, kind of
Even
stuff with Cuomo, it's kind of getting to that point, but he can get away with anything pretty much and not worry about losing re-election.
No, you're right. And outsider's just the cool thing to be right now, right? Because of Donald Trump. Donald Trump came in, he made being the outsider his brand, right? That's, you know, that was his whole spiel to the American public was he's not a, and he's correct as far as it goes. I mean, he
As
was,
far as
you know,
politics, yeah.
yeah, outside of politics, exactly. Now, he wasn't an outsider in the sense of the establishment. He knew all, you know, he breakfast with the Clintons and, you know, essentially every New York politician that ever existed. But that was not his brand. His brand was, I'm not a politician. I'm not one of these people. I am outside of all that. And Cuomo looks at that and says, oh, well, it worked for him. Let me see if it'll work for me. And now it's me against the world. The other thing is Americans love an underdog. And so if Andrew Cuomo can position himself as, oh, it's all these establishment figures coming against me, that sort of rallies Americans to his side just sort of instinctively. You know, we like underdogs. Sylvester Stallone figured that out and made about 17 movies with that same
think he's
theme,
still making those
all of
movies.
which were pretty successful. Yeah. So Cuomo's just trying. It's the Stallone grift. Cuomo's trying the Stallone grift. So
Well, speaking of grifts, I want to turn things over to Cameron, and he's going to talk about the Joe Biden press conference grift. I think you have some things to say about that.
And then I'll dive into the Jennifer Rubin grift in a minute with that. But I think the Biden press conference yesterday was really kind of a huge disappointment, but I think we all kind of expected that in a sense, where he had a predetermined list of about 10 reporters that he called on. And some of the photos being shown of this shows that he even had pictures with their names and what outlet they were from. And this kind of gives away to the fact that he announced this press conference days in advance. He's waited in terms of recent presidents. This is the longest a recent president has gone without hosting one. And this just goes to show that he doesn't really have the gravitas to be president at age 78. And I think when he's having these predetermined questions and stuff, it really, not questions, predetermined reporters that he's going to ask, it really raises a lot of concerns. So I wanted to ask you guys what your thoughts, I'll maybe ask George this, what your thoughts were on the press conference and maybe how it looks to other countries, for example, who are watching this.
So I actually, I probably differ a little bit from some people's view of this in that my expectations for Biden were so low that I actually thought he did pretty well, at least in comparison to what I expected him to do. Well, I did not watch the entire press conference. I watched most of it. And he had one moment there where he really seemed kind of confused and stumbled there for maybe, 30, 45 seconds. And eventually just kind of gave up and moved on to something else. For the most part, he seemed to kind of at least have some sense of what room he was in, who he was talking to, was able to stay more or less on track with his answers, many of which he just read outright from his notes, or at least that's what he appeared to be doing. My bigger concern is not that he, whether he looked good or didn't look good there. My bigger concern is that he took a week to prepare for this thing. That he, can you imagine how the press would eat Donald Trump alive if he just put a lid on it for a week and sat back and prepared for a supposedly sort of free-flowing news conference or press conference? I mean, that was totally not Trump's style, for one thing. And then to have a week and then to come out and give this sort of okay, he didn't disappoint me too much performance, I think that's really the telling piece to me. And so if I'm the leader of any country, anywhere in the world, whether an ally of the U.S. or an enemy of the U.S., I'm looking at that and coming away with a very different impression of this president than our former president. I think our enemies are probably emboldened. Really, this is the guy that I'm supposed to stand up to. I think I can manage that. And then I think our allies are probably concerned that this is the guy who's supposed to stand up with us. I'm not very happy about that. Scott Adams, one of my favorite commentators, creator of the Dilbert comic strip, which I've been reading for, 30 years or something, made a great comment on Twitter yesterday, I think it was. He said, hey, I'm actually glad about these prepared remarks that Joe Biden is giving in the guise of a press conference, because it means that he has someone on his staff who's actually capable of thinking about this stuff in a reasonable way and preparing these remarks for him to say. And I thought, well, there's something that he has got somebody on his staff who is thinking about this stuff. Okay, that's something. But yeah, I am very concerned. I'm actually more concerned about what our allies are thinking right now than what our enemies are thinking. Our enemies are always going to be pushing as hard as they can against whatever the U.S. interests they can find to push against. I'm more concerned about our allies and what they think they can now rely on from the President of the United States, because I don't know what that is. I don't know what they can expect from him, and I don't think he said anything yesterday that answers that question.
Yeah, and I think you can go ahead, Joe.
I just think it was a politician's press conference. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen. I think that Trump revolutionized. He revolutionized the idea of a press conference, right? Because
he's a performer.
What they would say was freewheeling, right? Yeah. He would give these freewheeling press conferences where he kind of thrived off of confrontations with reporters that he didn't agree with the Jim Acosta, where they kind of needed each other.
Right.
He loved, it was never, prepared. I don't think he ever knew who he was going to call on. He would, just decide what to do. He would foment 6 different news cycles with one press conference. It would go on forever and ever. And, each thing would be more, wow, did he really say that, than the other? And, it was great, I think, for the idea of a free press, where it's not just, you'll have 10 questions beforehand and the reporters the president already knows. This was just Trump calling on whoever and just kind of talking. I think that was good. This really was not that. This was kind of the very, very, very opposite of that. It wasn't a press conference in that it was just him kind of taking there were a few hard questions there. Him mainly just kind of being able to say he gave a press conference.
Yeah. It made me think of, you guys might both be too young to remember this, but, reality TV came on, 2 decades ago. And then halfway through, yeah, don't get me on that. I can talk all day about reality TV. But like, I don't know, 10 years, 12 years into reality TV, it started to come out that, wait a minute, some of these conversations are kind of scripted. Some of what's going on Survivor that looks very spur of the moment or whatever, they've kind of planned some of this out. Not word for word, but they've kind of said, okay, now then I'm going to say this and you say this, and they have an idea of where they're going. This is what this felt like to me. Like it wasn't all word for word. We knew exactly what this reporter was going to ask, exactly this question, but you kind of knew what that reporter was going to ask, and therefore Biden kind of knew what he had to say. It had that kind of feel to it to me.
Yeah, and I think there was one conservative columnist in particular who thought that Biden did a great job. Maybe we can pull up that tweet from Jennifer Rubin, but instead decided, yeah, Biden gets an A and the press gets a D minus. One particular person in the White House press corps was not part of that list, and that was Peter Doocy, Fox News's correspondent. He's been going back and forth with the White House press secretary lately because he's actually been asking tough, real questions and stuff. And I was kind of curious to maybe get Joe's thoughts on, do you think that Peter Doocy should have been included on this, or do you think that this was expected? Was the bar already low? Or does it kind of build on what George was just saying right now about the whole reality TV? We already kind of had an idea.
Yeah, I think that he should have called on him because it's good to have dissent, sort of. I think it would have shown Biden to be stronger if he had, called on someone who he knew was going to ask him a tough question. I think it would have helped him. I don't know why they didn't call on him at all. It doesn't look great. Trump would always call on Jim Acosta, for years. He
thrived on it.
For years. And they hated each other from day one, and yet he's kept calling on him, kept answering his questions. Same with reporters from NBC, whatever. I think the fact that it was just, ABC, PBS, CBS, NBC, Biden was calling on outlets who agreed with him already. Why couldn't he call on someone who was going to challenge him? It would have made him stronger. It would have made, for a stronger press conference for him. Just like it, galvanized Trump supporters when he would fight with a guy from NBC or CNN or whatever.
Stood up against them.
Yeah, I don't know why Biden didn't want to do that.
Yeah, well, first of all, can we start with the fact that the most honest thing Jennifer Rubin has done in the past 10 years has been to take conservative out of her Twitter profile. Out of her Twiddle profile. Twiddle profile.
I want to change that. I want to change it to Twiddle now.
Yeah, it pretty much is Twiddle, in my opinion. But I'd actually agree with her probably on the D minus for the press, but probably not for the same reason. Shame on the press for going along with this facade of a news conference. This is, for all of the talk the left has given about Donald Trump being a dictator and whatever, this is how dictators act. This is what press conferences in third world countries look like. A tame press calmly asking the questions they're expected to ask and not pushing back on the answers they're getting. There was a little bit of back and forth, but just enough so that when I say that this is a tame press, they can go, no, didn't you see me push back on that? Yeah, sort of. I mean, this was not the press conferences we've been seeing for the past 4 years.
I think Cecilia Vega with ABC was, she asked Biden rather, your messaging is leading to more migrants at the border. Right. Why is that? That was one of the few good questions that needed to be asked. Aside from that, it just wasn't great.
But it was also a question that Biden probably wanted asked there because it was an issue he knew he had to address. Yeah. So I don't even know, partial credit, but, not.
There's the old teacher in you.
That's right. Partial credit. You're not getting full credit for that. All right. Before we move on, Logan, I want to run that Joe Biden clip that I gave you from C-SPAN. But before we move to that, I do want to remind our viewers today to check out patriotdepot.com, where you can find supplies for the conservative revolution. We do have a special coupon code for you to use just through the end of this month, which seems like it should be a long way away, but it's like 5 days.
very
We've got like
close.
5 days left before the year is a quarter over, which is just, I can't,
Wow.
it seems to be going so fast. Maybe because 2020 took like 14 years to get through. Maybe that's
Yeah.
why.
It's that. Yeah.
Yeah, so you just have 5 days left to use code WJLive for 20% off everything at patriotdepot.com just through the end of this month, which is Wednesday. So it's coming up pretty quick. So don't miss out on that opportunity because it is passing soon. Logan, can we run that other clip from the Biden press conference? And then I want to point out a few things and get you guys to weigh in.
And if we leave, we're going to do so in a safe and orderly way. We're in consultation, I said, with our allies and partners and how to proceed. And Secretary Blinken is meeting in Brussels this week with our NATO allies, particularly those who have forces there. And General Austin is just met with Kayani, and I'm waiting for the briefing on that. He is the leader, quote, in Afghanistan and Kabul. And there's a UN-led process that's beginning shortly on how to mechanically get people, how to end this war. But it is not my intention to stay there for a long time. But the question is, how and in what circumstances do we meet that agreement that was made by President Trump to leave under a deal that looks like it's not being able to be worked out to begin with? How's that done?
All right. There's so many things to say about that. Very short, like a minute-long clip. And just a few things I'm going to point out. First of all, he's asked about this May 1 deadline that is fast approaching for the removal of American troops from Afghanistan. You know, Donald Trump used to talk about getting us out of the endless wars. And May 1 was a date that was established by the Trump administration to get American troops out of Afghanistan. So Joe Biden was asked about that. The very first thing he says is, if we leave, so we're starting right from the beginning, and let's just translate that. We're not leaving. That's what Joe Biden said. When he starts with if, that means forget about May 1. That's not happening. We're going to be there maybe forever. So that's the first thing.
Notice how he said, hopefully we don't want to stay there for very long.
Yeah, I don't want to be there for a long time.
Yeah. That's
You're
what
not
Bush
going to
said.
be alive for a
Yeah.
long time, Mr. President, with all due respect. What does long time mean? I don't even know. He's completely reading his answer, or he seems to be completely reading his answer. He's looking down the whole time. He repeats himself. We're going to talk to our NATO allies, especially the ones who have a presence there in Afghanistan. Why in the world would he be talking to people who aren't in Afghanistan? Why would that make any sense
the Greenland
at all?
ones.
Yeah, it's the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Afghanistan is nowhere near the North Atlantic, so how would that make sense? He then says that we just had a meeting with Kayani, who is a former Pakistani military leader, nothing to do with Afghanistan at all, not Ashraf Ghani, who is the current president of Afghanistan, who we assume he meant to say. But then he calls Kayani, trying to talk about Ghani, calls him the leader quote. It's like he's trying to cast some sort of doubt as to whether he's the legitimate leader of Afghanistan, which is really ironic given that this is Joe Biden, who just came out of this tumultuous election himself. He's casting doubt on someone else's election results. That seems pretty ironic to me. Abdullah, one of the primary opponent of Ashraf Ghani in that election, actually on Inauguration Day staged his own inauguration. So there are some kind of parallels between the U.S. situation, the Afghani situation, but the U.S. has recognized Ghani as the leader, the legitimate president of Afghanistan for some time now. So Isa Cox, who wrote about this for the Western Journal today, says that, very generously says that Joe Biden slipped up. That's what she says. He slipped up and called Ghani Kayani. He did that apparently while reading, however, so I'm not sure how that worked. then he says President Trump, like he couldn't remember who he just replaced in the White House. But then here's the kicker. This is my favorite part of the whole thing. He very clearly says, Joe Biden says, Kayani, the leader, quote, of Afghanistan. But the transcript from the White House doesn't say Kayani, it says Ghani. They completely pulled out his mistake, didn't note it. Like, I would be totally fine if they, put it in brackets to make it, make it clear that they were correcting
Like
what,
the Western
Biden
Journal
said,
does?
the way the Western Journal would, because a slip up is certainly possible. I don't have any problem with people slipping up. We do it.
Is there a
They
White
don't
House
do that.
Slack channel?
Yeah,
Probably.
exactly. But they don't do that. They don't do that. They just take Kayani out, Ghani's in. What mistake? What slip up? Joe Biden's totally fine. He's a brilliant man, no problems whatsoever. So remember when Joe Biden was going to be the president who restored respect to America in the world community with regard to U.S. foreign policy? Donald Trump was some kind of laughing stock around the world, but Joe Biden was going to come in and be serious, and people were going to be, they were going to respect the U.S. again. How do you guys think that's going?
Not good. I'm just gonna wager not good with that one. I mean, probably when we started having troops in Iraq and Afghanistan, I was probably eating paste watching Disney Channel at this time. But I definitely don't think that this is one of those things where any kind of slip up like this, it feels like I'm watching an episode of Veep. It's not like, it's kind of a damaging sign to other countries that we have a leader who has, we have a lot of slip ups and stuff. Gaffes, that's totally normal. But when we kind of talk about the international community and in the context of that, we need to be extra careful in what we're referring to these leaders as, because a lot of these people are very agitated. We don't want to ruffle any feathers needlessly because we have a leader who's making constant gaffes.
That's a really good point, Cameron. I remember, again, you guys will be too young to remember this, but back in the day, the first President Bush used to refer to Saddam Hussein as Saddam instead of Saddam. He intentionally pronounced it Saddam because that was an insulting word. And he was doing it on purpose. He was doing it to goad Hussein. And for the psychological value of it, Biden's kind of doing the opposite. Like he's potentially mistakenly goading these people into not thinking favorably of us. It's one thing to do it on purpose, trying to throw somebody off their game. It's another thing to be thrown off your game so badly that you're doing it to them not on purpose. Joe, what do you think? We've talked a lot about on WJ Live and elsewhere about how long Biden's actually going to be president of the United States. Is he in it for the long haul? He claimed in this press conference that he planned to run for re-election in 2024 at the age of, I guess, 82 at that point. That's what he said he was planning to do. But there's been a lot of question, as he talks about President Harris and just gaffe after gaffe, mistake after mistake. Did this news conference do anything to quell that talk of Biden not making it through a full term?
No, definitely not. I think that, there's kind of this sense, right, that Biden's not running for another term. And I think that's totally fair because he is old. He's, he'd be 86
Careful now.
at the end of his second term.
You start talking about old, I get nervous. Joe,
I know,
so I'm just,
I know. We saw the same things from Biden that we've seen, kind of over the last 2 years since Biden announced his run for the presidency. And he didn't, as you said, it really bothers me that, it's maybe just a pet peeve of mine, but, President Trump, despite his many faults, actually negotiated a deal with the Taliban to finally get the U.S. out of this endless war that has been going on for 20 years. And it seems like Biden is like, if we leave, we leave. If we stay, we stay. That's not how this works, right? We shouldn't be there. We shouldn't be there. And he doesn't seem to really grasp the importance of getting out safely, but getting out. You asked, do you think Joe Biden will run again? I don't. I think that he's saying right now that he will, because it would cause a bigger news cycle, a bigger ripple at this point for him to announce he's not running for re-election. I think he'll finish out his term, right? He has the best health care, probably available to man, the best doctors, the best
Fair.
care. But here's the thing. He wants to be seen as this statesman who came in and fixed the country, and then, maybe sort of like a George Washington type figure who knew when his work was done, and so he walked away on his own terms. I think that's what he wants to be seen as. I think that's, his goal is 1 term, 4 years, fix things, walk off into the sunset. I don't think he's running again.
Cameron,
Instead, he's
last
going to
word.
look like he's going to look like a discount Jimmy Carter instead. Like that's what he's going to come across. And that's the way he's leading right now. And honestly, there's probably going to be someone, my hope is that someone like DeSantis or another Republican's going to kind of come in and be like, hey, this isn't working for us. Jimmy Carter, he let other countries walk all over us and stuff. Part of the issue why he didn't get reelected was the Iran hostage crisis. He looked terrible during that whole situation, the way he handled that. So I think people will hopefully catch on and realize, hey, this isn't the guy fit to represent us to other countries, and hopefully we'll make the right decision come 2024.
Okay, I think it's totally unfair for you to talk about eating paste when we went into Afghanistan and then start talking about Jimmy Carter. That doesn't seem fair to me at all, Cameron.
Okay.
Last word on the over-under. How long do you think Joe Biden is going to be president of the United States? Does he make it for a full term?
I think he makes it for a full term. I just don't think he'll run for re-election.
Okay, so you guys are in agreement on that. I think I agree with that. I have to say that I will not be terribly shocked to find out I'm wrong if indeed that happens. But I think if I were a betting man, I think I'd be betting with you guys on that too. So to Joe's point earlier, as we wrap up here on another episode of WJ Live, the White House may try to hide Joe Biden's mistakes. We will never do that with ours. One of the things the Western Journal is most proud of, actually, is this is going to be ironic, but one of the things we're most proud of is our humility. We recognize fully that we are capable of making mistakes, and that, in fact, we do make them all the time. That's part of what it means to be human. We don't hide them, though. We have a corrections page that's robust. We have a ethics and editorial standards that is as long as any document that you care to read, longer probably than most, because we know we need those guidelines to keep things credible and honest and accurate for you, for our viewers, for readers of the Western Journal, and that's what we're here for, to equip you with truth. And we know that we will mess that up from time to time. So we have all these things in place, these checks and balances to make sure that anything we publish is read multiple times, and et cetera, to try to fix that as best we can and mitigate those mistakes. That's why I think we have a perfect rating from NewsGuard, which is an organization that exists solely to help you as a reader evaluate news sources. You don't have time to go do all the background checking of every online source that you find. So I really highly recommend places like NewsGuard. There are others out there. It's newsguardtech.com. They're not paying me to say this. I don't even know I'm saying it. So just to be clear, this is not a paid endorsement. It's nothing like that. But I think it's $2.95 a month, something like that, less than the price of a cup of coffee, as the salesmen like to say.
How much are you paying for your coffee?
Yeah, unless you buy coffee at McDonald's, and it's less than 3 cups of coffee. But regardless, it's not that much, and a free 2-week trial, so you can go on there and try it and see if it's useful to you. You will find that we are one of the few news organizations, the Western Journal is, with a perfect score from them. There are a few others, but it's a pretty limited list. It's rarefied air. And part of that is because we are honest, and we're honest about our failings, as opposed to the Joe Biden administration and the White House and press people who are dealing with you and conveying this information to you, the American people, the American voter. Which is a shame. It shouldn't be that way. It will always be that way, but it shouldn't. That is just how it is. So check out NewsGuard. Check out the Western Journal's rating on NewsGuard. I really encourage you to do that, and look at other sources there to find out who you can trust. there is a huge dearth of trust in the American news media today. There has been for quite some time. It's only been growing in recent years. I get this question all the time. Who do I go to? Who can I trust? What sources can I believe? Well, you can believe us, because if we do make that mistake, we will tell you. We'll say, hey, that thing we published, don't pay attention to that thing. Here's the truth. We found out the truth later. We've fixed it. Read this now instead. We'll do that every time. As soon as we find out we've made an error, we will do that. I'm not going to bury it on page 16 of the New York Times. It's going to be right there for you to see every single time. So you can trust us. We are credible. In fact, if you look at NewsGuard ratings, what you'll find is that when we tell you about those other sources, you can trust what we say about them more than you can trust what they say about anything else. That's a fact. You can support us at the Western Journal by going to westernjournal.com/join, and you'll find ways to support us there. And you can support us by coming back here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, to WJ Live. Again, click that subscribe button, click the bell, leave us a comment. We love to hear from you. We like to know how you think we're doing, what you think we could do better, and we hope that we will hear from you soon. We'll be back again next week. Until then, stay safe. Take care.
The Western Journal has rolled out a brand new subscription model designed specifically for readers like you, who want the unvarnished truth that the establishment media won't tell you. Our multi-tiered plans give you exactly what you want and help us fight fake news during this, the most important election of our lives. Become a subscriber to the Western Journal today and unlock exclusive features you won't find anywhere else. It's easy. Just follow the prompts in this video to join us in equipping readers with the truth.